Welcome to the Lesson 19 Workbook exercise video for Hebrew 1 and 2, Bright Old Testament 502-504 online edition. In this particular lesson, we are looking at the PL, so let's go ahead and dive into our exercises. You should know the drill by now. We are simply doing parsing. So how do we parse number 1? Number 1 is a very straightforward PL perfect 1CS. You can see the I class vowel underneath the bait and the dagesh in the kof. The tav hirik yod at the end marks it as the 1CS. How about number 4? The giveaway for number 4 is the mem. This marks a participle. We can then look at what's underneath the mem to determine what type of participle. The fact that this has a schwa underneath it tells us that this is a piel participle. If it had a patak, we would know that this is a hifiel, and we'll look at the pual next time. What about number 7? How do we parse this one? Number 7 is a very straightforward PL perfect. The shurik at the end marks it as a 3CP. We have the I class vowel under the first root letter and the dagesh in the middle root letter in the bait. How about number 10? Number 10 is actually 3 particular categories. We have a PL imperative, a PL infinitive construct, and a PL infinitive absolute. The fact that this is a PL can be seen by the fact that we have the dagesh in the middle root letter. You'll notice in the previous examples, whenever we have a schwa underneath the first root letter, the next letter always has a patak as its vowel. You could go back and look all the way up at number 1. We see a patak under the kof. Number 4, we see a patak under the bait. Number 7, there is no patak in that particular one because of the shortness of that verb. But here in number 10, we still see the patak. So we have a schwa under the preformative, but then the next letter will always be a patak. Just like in the nifal, we have a hirik under the preformative and a kametz under the first root letter. This tells us, again, that it is an imperative, and even though we have the dagesh in the pei that tells us that it's a PL, we still need to know what type of PL. And the fact that it's the patak under the samik, but it's missing the preformative, tells us that it's either an imperative or an infinitive absolute or infinitive construct. If it was a participle, it would have a mem. So these are the only 3 that are left. How about number 13? Number 13, again, is a PL participle. We have the mem marking the fact that this is a participle. We have the tav at the end marking the feminine singular participle. We have the dagesh in the middle root letter in the pei. And again, we have the schwa underneath the mem. You'll notice once again we have the patak under the first root letter under the samik. So we know that this is a PL participle feminine singular. What about number 16? Number 16 is a PL imperfect 1CP. We see the nun prefix marking the imperfect. We see the schwa underneath the nun that tells us this is a PL. With the dagesh in the dalet, we also see that it's a PL. So a PL imperfect 1CP. What about number 19? Number 19 is a tricky one because this is not a PL. This is a nifal. You'll notice there is no dagesh in the tzadeh, which is the middle root letter. We also have that kametz under the nun, as well as a hirik under the preformative tav. We know that this is an imperfect 2MP because of the tav and the shurik ending. We know that it's a nifal, again, because of that combination of hirik followed by a kametz. Again, this is Van Pelt being tricky. Let's move on to our next set of exercises, translation of biblical passages. Let's begin with the first line here, which is number 1 in your workbook. How do we parse this first one? Number 1 here starts with anshe, the men. This is a different form of men than we're used to seeing. It comes from the singular enash, which means a man. This is the men. We see the plural construct, sere yod, and we see it connected to the next word, ha'ir, the city. Thus, anshe also becomes definite, the men of the city. We see a cow verb here, shavru. We know that it's shavru because of the fact that we have the comments under the shin, as well as the fact that we have the shurik at the end of the verb. There's nothing else going on in this verb, which is why it's a cow. There's simply nothing going on. The metheg under the shin by the comments tells us that this is not shovru, but this is shavaru, which sounds like shavaru when you finish it, but it is shavaru. We have the direct object marker, et, followed by luach ha'evan, the tablet of stone. So the men of the city broke the tablet of stone. How about the next one, number 4? Number 4 starts with ha-na'ar, which is the young man, and then we're told what he's doing. Mabakesh, he is seeking. You'll notice that we have a participle here because of the mem prefix with a shva, telling us it's a PL. Confirmation is found by the dagesh that's in the kof. The man is seeking, and then the direct object marker, et zone, the flocks, and then we have aviv, his father. Zone is in construct with father, and since father is definite, it's his father. We know then that this is the flocks of his father, rather than a flock of his father. The young man is seeking the flocks of his father. How about number 7? Number 7 begins with a vav consecutive, followed by a PL imperfect 3ms, yadaver. PLs in particular are often intensive, but in this particular case, davar is always found in the PL. We don't translate it intensively, it's just simply davar. He spoke. The king spoke, hamelech being the subject. We then have a preposition, el, meaning to, combined with a pronoun. And then we have a comparative, ka, which is translated usually as like or as these words, kadavarim, ha'ela, these words. However, in this particular case, it's probably best to translate it the way that it is here, according to these words. He spoke to them like these words. He spoke to them in this way, according to these words. How do we translate the last one? Again, we have a vav consecutive, here followed by another PL, yasafer, where we have the translation he recounted or he told. Then we have what he told at the direct object marker, haholam. We have him telling the dream to his brothers, el ahaiv, to his brothers. This is a simple story about Joseph. Joseph recounted or Joseph told the dream to his brothers. Let's move on then to our next set of exercises, which is parsing. This is straightforward, just simply parse the particular verb, starting with number 1. Number 1 is pretty clear, it's a PL perfect. We see the dagesh in the lamed and the hirik under the mem. A PL perfect 3FS, because the comment's hey. What about number 4? Number 4 is a PL participle marked by the mem with the shva. Again, we have the dagesh and the lamed confirming that it is indeed PL. A PL participle masculine singular. Let's move on to number 7. Number 7 is a PL perfect 3CP from kala. The hey drops off before the shurik. We still have the dagesh and the lamed confirming that this is indeed a PL. How about number 10? Number 10 is again a PL participle because of the mem with the shva underneath. We see the dagesh in the lamed telling us that this is a PL participle. We know that it's feminine plural because we have ot, and the only time we get ot in a standard form in the third hey verb is with a infinitive construct. Since this is not an infinitive construct, the participle being marked by the mem, we know that the ot is part of the feminine plural. How about number 13? Number 13 is a straightforward PL imperfect 3ms, the schwa under the yod preformative, the hierik in the samik. How about number 16? Number 16 is also a PL perfect, a 3FS because of the comments hey. We have the dagesh in the vav in the middle of this verb. You notice that the vav here is not acting as a shurik, it is acting as a consonant with a dagesh. What about number 19? Number 19 is a PL participle. You see the mem with the schwa, and again we have a dagesh in the vav, not marking it as a shurik, but marking it as a doubled vav as part of the PL stem. This is masculine singular because there's nothing else taking place. Number 22 is also a PL participle. Again, we have the mem plus the schwa telling us it's a PL participle. We have the hierik yod mem at the end telling us that it is a masculine plural. What about 25? Number 25 is a PL imperfect 3ms. Again, we have the yod plus the schwa. However, we don't have a dagesh in the chet because it does not take a dagesh. So instead, we leave it out. But still, we know that this is a PL imperfect because of the yod with the schwa. And last but not least, how do we parse number 28? Number 28 is a nifal, not a PL, even though we see the dagesh in the nun. That is not the root letter that is in the middle. In this case, it would be chet. We also have an I-class vowel under the aleph and a kametz under the nun. These are both indications that this is a nifal imperfect, and since it starts with an aleph preformative, we know it is 1 CS. Well, that brings us to the end of our exercises. I hope you were able to master the PL as we move on next time to the pual.